Wake up every morning before the sun keeps digging that hole till the day is done. Wake up every morning before the sun keeps digging that hole till the day is done. You got to go and dig those holes. You got to go and dig those holes. Welcome to Sup Media Reviews, the podcast that never needs spoiler alerts because it takes you back in time to relive the nostalgia of classic TV shows and films that you've probably already seen. I'm your host, Kiara, and each week I'll dive into the archives to bring you my take on movies and TV shows from at least 20 years ago. From cult classics to forgotten gems, I'll review them all and give my honest opinion on their impact and whether or not they still hold up today. Join me as we revisit the iconic characters, memorable moments, and timeless themes that made these shows and films so special. So take a break from adulting and get ready for a trip down memory lane with Sup Media Reviews. What's up, home slices? Thanks so much for tuning into Sup Media Reviews. I'm your host, Kiara, and before we dive into the review today, I want to plug next week's episode. On Tuesday, May 21st, I'll be doing a special 20th anniversary review of Shrek 2 with Aaron and Jesse, the hosts of the Cage Queens podcast. You might remember them from last year when they helped me review the first Shrek movie. On their podcast, the Cage Queens have over 80 episodes of Nicolas Cage movie reviews. I even joined them for episode 68, where we reviewed Outcast. I suggest you head to wherever you find podcasts and give them a listen. I'm so excited to have them join me next week. So make sure you tune in next time and follow us on YouTube, Pinterest, Instagram, and Facebook for the latest updates. Now back to our regularly scheduled programming. This week, I'm stoked to review the amazing 2003 Disney film Holes, which is based on the 1998 Louis Sekar novel of the same name. The movie features Shia LeBouf as Stanley Yelnats, Sigourney Weaver as the Warden, Jon Voight as Mr. Sir, Patricia Arquette as Kissing Kate Barlow, and Cleo Thomas as Zero. I'm particularly excited because my sister and returning guest Arabia is here to review this movie with me. Say hi, Arabia.
What's up, everybody? I'm back.
Yes, this is Arabia's 7th appearance on Sup Media Reviews. So, of course, I'm always happy to have her here with me. Now, Holes came out when I was 12, and back then, Disney Channel had me in a chokehold. So, I'm excited to talk about this movie because I remember it pretty fondly. Here's some fun facts about the film. This movie is low-key packed with some iconic stars. Sigourney Weaver wanted to be in this film because Holes is her daughter's favorite book. Now, despite being billed first, Sigourney Weaver does not appear until approximately 40 minutes into the film. Arabia, do you know the kind of main thing that makes Sigourney Weaver iconic?
Of course, look at Alien playing Ridley. Of course.
Yes.
I love Sigourney Weaver. She's a great actress.
Yeah, she is. She is. The second fun fact is that Dule Hill played Sam. He later appeared as Sean, or James Roday's co-star, Gus, on the television show Psych, which was on the air for a number of years starting in 2006. Now, in the Psych episode 65 Million Years Off, when seeing all the holes that the paleontologist dug on the land, Sean mentions that this is like that movie with Sigourney Weaver. He also mentions Shia LaBeouf and Jon Voight and keeps guessing movies but never correctly guesses the movie that he appeared in, Holes. So there was a little cute self-referential moment. Did you watch Psych, Arabia?
No, I did. I know what it is. I may have seen an episode, but I never really watched it before.
I used to really enjoy that show. They were so silly to be adults. It was very funny to me. I enjoyed that show a lot. And Gus was my favorite character because he had at least a little more sense than Sean.
Oh, okay.
And the final fun fact, a screenplay was initially written by Richard Kelly, who greatly departed from the source material by altering it to a dark, violent adaptation of the story set in a post-apocalyptic world with changes such as Stanley's last name being Kramer, and he was sent to Camp Green Lake for mercy killing his little sister to end her suffering from radiation sickness. The warden was a man. Armpit had murdered someone. Mr. Pendanski actually was an undercover agent, and the item that they were digging for was actually a strange hammer-like weapon that could fire out electric bullets. The studio reportedly found the script far too dark and disturbing for a children's movie, as well as straying far too much from the source novel, so they rejected it in favor of the far more faithful script written by the novel's author, Louis Sekar. Kelly eventually incorporated portions of the script into a 2006 film called Southland Tales. Arabia, what do you think of this alternate version of Holes that Richard Kelly dreamt up?
What? This is completely not the story at all. Like, other than him going to a camp, but like a post-apocalyptic story, a hammer that shoots electric bullets. Like, he was like, I'm gonna make this my own. I don't really need the book material at all. Like, what? Mercy killing his sister, like, is way darker in the original story is already dark in itself. Like, it is. Come on now. That's pretty crazy. I don't know. At least he got to use it in another movie. I never heard of that movie before, but that's kind of nuts.
I haven't either, but why would he stray so far? Can you imagine reading the novel and then going to the movie theater and seeing
this is like, you know, a lot of movie and books adaptations, they'll stray from stuff, but no, this is completely not the story. You just came for a whole new movie, and I've been like, oh, what did I buy? What ticket did I purchase?
Right, exactly. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I would have liked that version of the story. It's crazy.
It is crazy. It's just,
Well, listeners, if you want to check out Holes, you can watch it on Disney Plus as of the recording of this episode. Now, this is the part of the show where we talk about our personal connections to the film. Arabia, what is your personal connection to Holes, and why do you like it so much?
When it came out, I was 5. I don't know my earliest memory of watching it. I don't know if I watched it when I was 5, but Holes used to be on all the time. That was like Disney Channel's favorite movie. And I enjoyed the movie, but then they would play it at school also. And at some point I was like, I'm tired of this. I'm so tired of this story. They'd play it all the time. And it was just like, come on, can you watch something else? But it is a good story, but after you watched it like 20 times, you're like, okay, I don't want to watch this anymore. But when I got older and I eventually rewatched it again, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot how good this is. And it's just a good little story, and baby Shia LeBouf, and it's a good story. Not for you to watch back to back to back to back, but every now and then it's pretty good. And like it has some, you know, like some iconic moments that you remember and that they use for memes like today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, back in my tween years when this movie came out, I had started watching Disney Channel faithfully. Like, I was always a big Nickelodeon fan as a child, but Disney Channel had programming that appealed to me once I started to get a little bit older. That's So Raven had debuted on Disney Channel January of 2003, and Holes came out just a couple of months later. Now, if any of you all know how Disney Channel works, they use the commercials to promote upcoming movies and share music videos and show behind the scenes clips of like movies that they make. So I remember being so hyped up to see the movie with all of the previews and dig it up, music videos. And, you know, I saw all of those things kind of in anticipation for the movie. And of course, Shia LaBeouf from, you know, Even Stevens was already part of like Disney Channel canon. So I just remember being like hyped up and really wanting to see the movie. I, of course, liked Shia LaBeouf at the time. He's a little bit problematic as a person now, but he was a true Disney star. Did you watch Even Stevens?
I did watch Even Stevens. It wasn't my favorite, but I enjoyed it. But Even Stevens movie was like awesome though.
Yeah, I love the Even Stevens movie. The Even Stevens show was like, I found him to be quite annoying.
Yeah.
And sided more with his older sister. I didn't watch it that often, but I did really enjoy the movie. And at the time, you know, I wouldn't call myself boy crazy, but I did enjoy watching a movie that had like a predominantly age appropriate male cast. So yeah. That was cool. And also this movie had a darkness to it that I don't know that I appreciated at the time. But when I was in high school, I read the book, which was pretty much exactly the same as what happened in the movie. But since I was older, I could pick up on some of the darker themes like racism, the forbidden nature of interracial relationships, detention centers, and like the criminal justice system when it comes to juveniles, work camps, poor/dangerous adult influences, like like there's a quite a few darker themes in this story. But the story also explores like restorative justice, fate, keeping promises. It still does have a kind of youthful hope to it, even though there are some like more darker and more mature themes. But yeah, I really enjoyed the story as a child, and I hadn't seen it in a few years prior to watching it for this review. So I'm excited for us to dive in. So we start the movie with some young-ish boys digging holes in what looks like a vast desert. The song in the background is an a cappella version of Digging Up, oh, oh. And a man with a deep voice, or a boy with a deep voice, is like, you got to go and dig those holes. But the way the song is sung at this point in the story actually sounds similar to a song that maybe like a chain gang or railroad workers would use to keep their rhythm, which is kind of dark, especially just to start the movie. But a young boy who is digging holes at this camp spots a rattlesnake, and out of kind of desperation and exhaustion, the boy, who's called Barf Bag, offers his naked foot to be bitten by the snake. And so some of the other boys in the camp who are nearby, and they all appear to be between the ages of like 12 and 16, are asking him like, don't do it. Like one of them is saying like, it's not that bad. Like for you to like risk your life with the rattlesnake. But the boy does end up being bitten anyway. And the fact that this kid would rather risk his life with the rattlesnake than to dig another hole is crazy. So yeah, this movie is already dark, like literally a few minutes in. So next up, we see a pair of shoes or cleats flying through the air. They fall and hit the unsuspecting Stanley Yelnats IV, who is played by Shia LeBouf. We hear him doing a monologue about how his family has had bad luck due to a 150-year-old curse that the main character doesn't necessarily believe in. Next up, we see a few things happen simultaneously. Like in one scene, Stanley is on his way to the desert in a bus with an armed guard named Buster. And in another scene, Stanley is being chased by the police with the stinky cleats that fell from the sky, right, in his hands. So he ends up getting apprehended by the cops because of those shoes, and the cops take him home. Now, Stanley's father, who is Stanley Yelnats III, is played by Henry Winkler, and he's an inventor who is dead set on creating something that will cure smelly feet. So all around their apartment, it smells awful. And he has multiple like inventions going, experimenting on smelly shoes, trying to find the right cure. It sounds like a nightmare. How could you live in that?
There were shoes everywhere. I can't imagine the constant odor that never goes away. I'm like, no, honey, no, we're not doing this. You have to find you like a workshop because I'm not living this way. It's not happening.
Yeah. So that there's another aspect of, you know, his family not having a lot of money and not being able to like afford a separate workplace.
Right.
And the idea of them not being rich comes up again in kind of multiple arenas throughout the story. But young Stanley lives with his dad, his mom, and his grandpa is Stanley Yelnats II. The grandpa is kind of funny, and like he doesn't want to cooperate with the police who are, you know, come there to drop him off and apparently do some investigation. Never seen anything like that happen where the police come and drop your child off and they also have a warrant and are looking for evidence.
Right. What's happening?
Yeah, it's very strange, but the police are there and they take a picture of young Stanley's bed in his area. He actually shares a room with his grandpa, and they take a picture of a bedroom posters that have the face of a baseball player nicknamed Sweet Feet on his wall. Apparently, this is germane to the case. Now, at dinner, after the police leave, Grandpa blames all of their misfortunes on his no-good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing grandpa, who is Stanley's great-great-grandfather. The grandpa and the dad start to sing a song, if only the woodpecker sighs, and they go on, and the mom tells them to stop singing, and neither she nor young Stanley believe in the curse, and the mom believes that they won't need a lawyer because they'll just tell the truth, and it's not like they could really afford a lawyer anyway. Arabia, what do you think of this case? The shoes literally came out of nowhere, and now Stanley's got to go to court.
It's crazy. They were like, where'd you get those shoes? And he was like, what are you talking about? I don't know what happened. And it's just like, oh, he has to go to court. They didn't like talk to him and ask him what's going on, or they didn't care. I'm like, did they get a public defender? Did the public defender like not do anything? Or they were just like, we're going to stick to the truth, which is something you should never do because they don't care. It can get really misconstrued and they'll make it seem like it's your fault. And he was like, I don't know how old Stanley's supposed to be, like 14 maybe?
That's how old I think, yeah.
And he had never done anything before. And I felt like it was harsh. His punishment was harsh. He had no record. I don't know, because the shoes were quote unquote famous, that they were like, yes, let's throw him away. We don't care about him anymore. But like, he never did. He had like no clean record. I thought it was a little extreme.
Right. So next up, we see Stanley and his family in the courtroom, and the judge is kind of a hard ass. He basically says, you want to go to jail or you want to go to Camp Green Lake? And obviously, Stanley picks the fun-sounding camp. Arabia, knowing what you know about Camp Green Lake, which option would you take? Jail or Camp Green Lake?
Oh my gosh. Is it crazy to be like jail because of like you're in the freaking hot desert, deadly lizards, some crazy kooks that run the camp, you're digging holes every day, but in the jail there's air conditioning, I think, and there's no deadly animals about. And you're not doing manual labor. What the heck?
Yeah, it's crazy that you're actually considering that jail would be better. Yes. Yep, well, Stanley is sentenced to 18 months at Camp Green Lake. He's going to lose a year and a half of his life. The other thing that I am thinking about is, what about their education? Like, they're literally missed like a year and a half of school. Are these kids not getting an education while they're in this juvenile detention center? I don't know. They don't talk about it, and it's probably not germane to the story. But I just don't know how the juvenile detention system works.
What would you choose? The camp or jail?
I'd probably pick jail. I'm not built for manual labor. Or dangerous stinking animals, because it's not just lizards, it's rattlesnakes, it's scorpions. Yeah. They
were like, yeah, we're going to send these kids in the middle of a desert. It's like rattlesnakes and scorpions that can bite you and poison you. But the lizards are killing you. Like, they're running around. There's no control over them. And they're like, hopefully they don't run into one. Like, the boys could die at like any moment. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. But yeah, on the way to Camp Green Lake, it's a desert filled with adolescent boys digging holes. And Stanley sees a brief vanishing image of a black man with a mule and a cart attached. That black man is played by Dule Hill. Again, he plays Gus on Psych as well. He's a pretty funny guy, and I actually enjoy him as an actor. But when Stanley arrives to the camp, he sees, these other adolescent boys in orange jumpsuits. There's some log cabins, and there is no lake. He is shocked to see that there is no lake. Now, enter Mr. Sir, which is a funny name. Stanley is brought to the office of a sunflower seed eating authority figure named Mr. Sir, played by Jon Voight. Arabia, do you know who Jon Voight's daughter is?
Yeah, isn't it Angelina Jolie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which seems impossible to me. So I looked up Angelina Jolie's mother. Her last name is Bertrand. I can't remember her first name. But Angelina Jolie looks exactly like her mother.
Really? I never seen her before. Her mother
apparently is an actress too. And there's a young picture of Angelina Jolie's mom that's black and white. And if you look at it quickly, you'll be like, this is Angelina. She is almost a spitting image of her mother and has no physical features that look like Jon Voight at all.
Her daughter looks like, she has two daughters, but one of them, I think they both look kind of like her, but one of them really, really does look like her as well. And I think once she gets older, she'll look even more like her. So maybe that gene pool is very strong.
Apparently, yes. So yeah, we also learned that Yelnats is Stanley, spelled backwards. So, in case you didn't pick up on that. So when Stanley hears that Mr. Sir is named Mr. Sir, he laughs. So Stanley kind of comes across as a wise guy a little bit. But Mr. Sir gives Stanley a tour, the area, and points out that they don't need guard towers or they don't need a fence because it's probably impossible for a person to survive an escape attempt with the next water source being 100 miles away. We also find out that Mr. Sir has a gun for yellow spotted lizards, not for the kids. The delinquents apparently get 2 pairs of clothes, one for work and one for chilling. And then the work clothes get washed every 3 days. And when the work clothes get washed, their relaxing clothes become their work clothes. So potentially these boys will wear the same clothes for 6 days in a row.
They're out in the hot sun. They're boys sweating and smelling. I don't know if they got deodorant or what, but 6 days worth of marinated stench? I don't think so.
Of a teenage boy.
Oh, gosh. Like, what's that worse than the shoe apartment he lives in or the boy?
Maybe he was used to it and he went nose blind. Yeah, that would make sense. Well, he also finds out that each day he is ordered to dig 1 5 by 5 foot hole, and the shovel is his measuring stick. And once the hole is dug, that child is done for the day. So the slower they dig, the longer they have to stay out in the hot sun. They also have to watch out for those lizards and rattlesnakes. And apparently, if you're bit by a lizard, you will surely die a slow and painful death. So these lizards have a deadly bite.
It's crazy. It's just, you're going to dig this hole. I've never dug a hole except at the beach. And that took a long time. And that's like a little hole that I can like semi sit in. But a 5 by 5 hole on some hard desert ground while watching out for lizards. Yeah, I don't know who sanctioned this camp. I don't really know what kind of regulations they got going on. But this would not be okay today. Like, for
Yeah, it's too much. Next up, we meet Dr. Pendansky, the camp counselor who insists that he respects Stanley and has a cheery, less severe stance than Mr. Sir. And he kind of speaks in these kind of lofty terms, and he's a smaller man. He's kind of short, and he continues Stanley's tour of the place. Here are the bullet points. The showers are cold water only and are basically outdoors. Stanley is in the D tent, and the number 1 rule is to not upset the warden, whose living quarters are way better than everybody else's in the camp. And she also has a fancy old school Chrysler car. Right then, 3 boys approach the doctor and Stanley asking about Barfbag, who's the kid from earlier who got the rattlesnake bite. And apparently he's still in the hospital. The 3 boys are named Rex, Alan, and Theodore, but a kid with some thick glasses reintroduces them as X-Ray, Squid, and Armpit. Dr. Pendansky is nicknamed Mom. Armpit is asked to show Stanley his stained cot inside their sleeping tent where he meets his other group members. They are Magnet and Zigzag. He also meets a smaller kid named Zero, and in a weird twist, the doctor says that they call him Zero because there's nothing going on in his stupid little head.
I don't know why he was so mean to Zero. Like, he was like, oh, I respect you guys. And I know he was full of crap, but like, yeah, this guy's stupid. So we just call him stupid pretty much.
Yes, you're exactly right. That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, okay, he was just being nice and just trying to be inspiring to these kids just a couple seconds ago. And then when it comes to Zero, he's like, well, this dumb idiot. Like,
yeah.
What the heck? I still don't understand what he has against Zero. So Armpit, or Theodore, aka Armpit, is designated as Stanley's mentor. In the next scene, Stanley, calls to Theodore asking where he can fill up his canteen. And their canteens are like repurposed jugs that have like a rope around them so that they can carry them around. But Theodore puts Stanley in a headlock and demands to be called Armpit, a name he got because he's always musty. And considering that he's wearing the same clothes for 6 freaking days, I'd probably be musty too.
No, I think he might be super musty, like extra musty.
He's a very musty boy.
It's like, you don't take home to mother.
Yes. But Pit, he already has a nickname, Armpit, but then they nickname it further, and they also call him just Pit. Ends up pushing Stanley to the ground. And so already Stanley is kind of not fitting in with the group. And these boys are like a little bit of a rough bunch.
He's fresh meat.
So now it's time to eat, and they are in like the mess hall area, and the menu is almost 100% beans. Okay, they also have banana jello, which I didn't even know was a thing. Like there's a little voiceover saying like what kind of beans they have, and banana jello, and I was like, I've never heard of it. What is that? I've never had banana jello. But Stanley sits with his group, the detent, and immediately X-Ray asserts his dominance and takes Stanley's bread since Stanley didn't dig that day. Stanley's the new kid in town and decides to not put up a fight, but he knows X-Ray is going to be a problem. X-Ray is the kid with the thick glasses, and he's very unlikable already. Mm-hmm. And I don't like the fact that Stanley has already been bullied by his 2 black tent members.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's like, wow.
Not a fan.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But anyways, they ask the age-old question of like, what crime got Stanley to Camp Green Lake? Stanley reveals that he was accused of stealing the World Series cleats of Clyde Sweetfeet Livingston, a fictional baseball character who had donated the cleats to a homeless shelter. Zero, who has literally never spoken a word at the camp, asked if the cleats had red X's on them. Stanley confirms that they did. Zero looks down a little bit, looks a little guilty, and we get a flashback to the courtroom scene where Sweetfeet is actually testifying against Stanley, saying that he donated the shoes to that charity because he was an orphan at that orphanage, and he can't see how anyone would steal from homeless children. Sweetfeet is portrayed by Rick Fox. So now we're getting some more color. Now, when we saw Stanley in the courtroom earlier, it was his sentencing, and there was virtually nobody in the courtroom but the judge, his parents, and him. Now, knowing that they did not get a lawyer and they had to go against a famous baseball player, this was probably a high profile case that was like publicized on TV and stuff. They definitely needed a lawyer.
Yes. They needed a lawyer. They needed a lawyer no matter what. Like,
yeah. So yeah, he had no chance. So it's nighttime. It's Stanley's first night at the camp, and all the boys are asleep in the tent except for Stanley. He's thinking about his family. We get a few flashbacks that tell us more about his family history and how all the men in the family have been cursed. Now, we learned that Stanley Yelnats the first, who is Stanley's great-grandfather, was robbed by a lady bandit named Kissin' Kate Barlow, who would kiss the men that she killed. In another flashback, we see Kate and her bandits look a little ethnic, but they rob the first Stanley Yelnats for a small chest that has his name engraved on it. Apparently, that first Stanley Yelnats invested money in the stock market, and Kate took it all. She did not kill him, but she left him to roam around in the desert for 16 days, broke and alone.
Kissin' Kate Barlow is a badass name. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So it's time to wake up. At the camp, it's still dark outside, and a reveille blows to awake the boys for work, and Stanley actually didn't go to sleep at all, so he's starting his first day with no rest. The boys grab their shovels and some sticky tortillas that are slathered in honey or syrup or something, which is like very strange.
Yeah.
But Stanley picks a shovel that is marked with like orange tape, and X-Ray takes it from him because apparently it's shorter than the others, which means that he can dig a smaller hole. So again, Stanley is being bullied and just kind of having things taken from him. Everyone in the detent seems to just kind of bow to X-Ray's bullying, and it's hard for me to find a character that's less likable than X-Ray in this film. The boys start their digging at the dig site, and Stanley is instructed to dig a hole, and if he finds anything of interest that, the warden wants to see, he'll get the rest of the day off. Mr. Sir tells Stanley that digging holes builds character and that he's not looking for anything in particular. And that is a crazy thing to say. He's like, you bring a boy to the desert, you make him dig holes, and you turn a bad boy into a good boy. And it's like, what?
How does that work?
Right. What kind of child development is that? Yeah. Stanley, of course, is not familiar with digging a hole in the desert and has a rough start. Not only is he a slow digger, the other boys are putting their dirt into his hole. Yeah. So it's going to be a while before he gets the hang of this thing. And while he's digging, there's another flashback, telling us more about his family history. So we go back to Latvia, where Stanley's great-great-grandfather is working for a farmer and has a crush on that farmer's daughter. Now, this great-great-grandfather visits a fortune teller named Madame Zeroni, who is played by none other than Eartha Kitt. She tells him that he should go to America, where her son is, and that he should forget the farmer's daughter because she's stupid. He insists on trying to marry the farmer's daughter, but is surprised that a chunky, nasty man named Igor has offered his fattest pig as a dowry for the girl's hand in marriage. So he actually has some competition. So Madame Zeroni instructs Stanley's ancestor to take the smallest pig that's in like her little pig pen and every day carry it up the mountain to drink from the stream while he sings, if only the woodpecker sings a size song. The pig is supposed to get fatter each day, and Stanley's great-great-grandfather is going to get stronger and stronger from carrying that big fat pig up a mountain to drink from a stream. And so when the pig is big enough and he gives it to the farmer, he's supposed to return to Madame Zeroni and carry her up the mountain and sing while she drinks from the stream so she can get stronger too. She does this kind of crazy laugh and says that if he forgets to take her up the mountain, he and his family will be cursed for always and eternity.
Yeah. Her voice is so good. I love it. Yzma, did you watch Kuskus New?
I did. Eartha Kitt is like so iconic. And this is why I'm saying like this movie is chock full of stars, right? Like Eartha Kitt has had like a super long acting career and people know her from Boomerang. She sang the original version of Santa Baby. Santa Baby, just slip a sable under the tree. And of course singing and dancing, and she's an icon.
Yes.
So yeah, she's kind of a big deal, another big deal in this movie. And so this is kind of like the origin of that 150-year curse that we heard about earlier, right? So back at Camp Green Lake, the boys are getting water from the water truck, and the young Stanley is getting his first blisters on his hand, which look pretty painful. But back to the flashback, the farmer's daughter is asked to choose between Igor and Stanley's great-great-grandfather, who now has a pig that's the exact same size as Igor's. And we find out that the great-great-grandfather is named Elia. So the daughter is a silly girl. And instead of picking the obviously more attractive Elia, who had to work really hard to get a pig the same size as Igor's, she makes the men guess a number that she's thinking of. She's like, from 1 to 10, like, guess a number. And Elia is just so heartbroken that she didn't just choose the younger, more attractive man who worked really hard to like earn her hand in marriage.
Yeah, like Madame Zeroni said, she's stupid. I was like, girl, are you serious right now? She was like, I don't know. I was like, what do you mean you don't know? Look at this man and look at the other man. Come on now.
Yes. And she's like, well, which pig is bigger? And it's like, girl, if you don't pick Elia, because he's a handsome man.
And he worked hard for you. Like, he was like determined.
Right. Exactly. And he's age appropriate. That Igor looked awful.
Yeah.
Anyways, Elia gets mad that, she didn't make the obvious choice. And he tells the dumb farmer's daughter to marry Igor and to keep the pig as a wedding present. And he runs off. So Igor and the farmer are happy. And I think we are all happy that women aren't traded for piggies anymore. Sounds like an awful. Oh, can you imagine having to marry the first guy who brings home a cow?
Yeah. Oh, the dowry thing. I'm glad that's like not a thing anymore. That's crazy.
It's awful. Awful. Yeah. No judgment if you do it in your culture. It's just like, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
My fate being in the hands of a man with a cow.
Yeah.
Elia is actually so mad at this situation that he packs up and leaves town for America, not fulfilling his end of the bargain to Madame Zeroni, her promise ringing in his ears as he rides the waves to a foreign land. So he actually did not remember that he didn't keep his promise until he was already well on his way to America. So yeah, thus begins the curse. He better be glad that that ship actually made it to America, because if he had real bad luck, there would be no more Stanleys. So back at the camp, Zero has finished digging as he's gotten really good at it. And he's like the fastest digger at the camp. He's just concentrating, I guess. which is interesting because he's the smallest.
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
like, I think the other boys are just kind of lazy a little bit. And that's why they're not digging as fast as they can. But Zero is like, let me get up out of here. So later, Stanley finishes his hole really late and is all alone in the field, like in the dig site, because everyone else finished before him. So when he's leaving the outdoor shower area that night to get ready to go to bed, Mr. Sir approaches him with his gun drawn. And Stanley is scared because there's a man pointing a gun at me. But Mr. Sir is actually aiming at the dangerous yellow spotted lizard behind him. Mr. Sir misses the lizard when he takes a shot. And when Stanley turns around, the lizard does this creepy screeching noise and has these weird kind of like neck frill thingies that flare up, reminiscent of the dinosaur from Jurassic Park with that spit tar a little bit. But the lizard, in a freaky scene, runs at Stanley on two legs, and Mr. Sir shoots his CGI head.
Yeah.
Arabia, what do you think of the cartoon lizard?
I don't remember it being so bad. Like, one, it's like,
Right.
oh, this is scary because this thing is like walking at me. But like, oh, this is fake. This is really bad now looking, because they look real when they're normal, because they can't do that. Bearded lizards don't do that in real life, so they have to make them do it. It wasn't good, but it was really funny to me. Like a little person running at you.
Yes, it was a little bit freaky, right? But the effects are pretty bad, and it makes it funny.
Yeah.
It makes it funny. And so the lizards in the movie are actually Australian bearded dragons.
Yeah.
And they were painted with non-toxic children's finger paint and given CGI fangs. So those yellow spots on their back were not real. Like, they're not on the actual animal.
Yeah. I've seen one in real life, but I never realized that they were the same lizards. Because, Tia had one for her class, and I remember I saw it one time. I was like, oh, these are cool. And I was like, oh, I'm glad they don't really do that thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a cousin who owned one as well. I could never own a reptile. But yeah, apparently they are nice pets to have. So I wonder if they got a bad rap after this movie, or if like sales increased. Because of the movie. Who knows? People are weird. So anyways, back at the tent, Stanley tells, his tent mates about what happened. And they start to tell stories to try to guess why they're digging, because they don't believe that they're digging to build character. They think they're digging to find something. And of course they're right, but they don't know what. So yeah, in the next scene, we get a little montage set to a voiceover of a very dishonest letter that Stanley is writing his mom about all the fun he's having at camp. And he talks about it like it's summer camp, and it's like, you got sent here because you were punished.
Yeah, this is your sentence.
Right. He couldn't even make the letter sound like he was not enjoying it. Like he wasn't enjoying it. But anyways, we see Stanley growing accustomed to the humdrum daily rigmarole of digging holes all day, dealing with piss poor conditions, the bullying that's going on from the older and bigger kids, and spending time with his tent mates. Now, one of the tent mates, Squid, grabs the letter that he's about to mail to his mom and makes fun of him, letting him know that his parents are actually glad to be rid of him. And so Squid is projecting.
Yeah.
Because, one of the things about kids who get into trouble, sometimes they don't have the best parental figures. And so it seems like he doesn't have caring parents, which is another kind of darker theme in the story. Now, at the dig site, Stanley finds a fossil of some fish, hoping to get the day off. Now, the doctor is like the warden or archaeologist. She don't care about fossils. And so from this, Stanley gets the nickname Caveman. The doctor also reveals that this vast desert used to be a lake and a town, and that the warden's grandfather owned the lake and half the town. And I'm like, how you own a lake? Anyways, in a flashback, we see the warden's grandfather on the lake and the town. It's probably about 100 years ago, and it's like an old school Texas town. This does take place in Texas. And we see Sam, the black man and vision that Stanley saw when he arrived at the camp, and he is selling large onions and onion-based tonics and tinctures that help with common ailments like baldness, hemorrhoids, rheumatism, measles, etc. He even claims that his mule, Mary Lou, is over 100 years old because she eats onions every day. We also see a woman, a teacher named Miss Catherine, played by the famous Patricia Arquette, who's another famous actor. Again, more stars. Now, some men pull up with the dead body of a man who was bitten by a lizard, and we find out that Sam's onion juice also repels lizards. So Sam is a businessman who, is out here selling cure-alls.
Yeah.
He's out here selling these giant onions, and yeah, I love a good businessman. And he, Mary Lou just carries his little cart into town and he just, sells his wares and makes himself useful to the town. And so Sam exchanges some of his famous onions for Catherine's sweet peaches. So they don't talk about where she got them from, if she owns an orchard or what, but it's an exchange that they do. And they appear to be sweet on each other. But Catherine appears to have the eye of every man in town. So we have a white lady and a black man 100 years ago. So it's about to be
bad. It's not about to be a happy ending, unfortunately.
Yeah, right. So back on the dig site, X-Ray chastises Stanley for the little fossil thing that he pulled off earlier, saying that, X-Ray's been there for 6 months and he's never had a day off, and that it wouldn't be fair for a newcomer to get the day off. So anything that Stanley finds should be given to X-Ray. And Stanley kind of reluctantly agrees, but you can tell that he is like not with it. I cannot stand that bug-eyed kid.
Yeah.
I can't stand him. I can't stand him. But back at the camp, Stanley accidentally gets into a fight with an older bully, but his tent mates de-escalate the situation before it gets too crazy. Zero is seen picking up a pool ball because he's ready to
throw down for Stanley.
But he let it go when things calmed down. Now, despite them all being in this crazy situation, this is the first time we see some kind of unity between the tent mates. And the crew gives him his nickname, Caveman, for the first time and says, nobody messes with Caveman. So they are building a little bit of community.
It was a cute little scene because Stanley was like, who's Caveman?
Yes.
It's like, wait, I'm Caveman? I'm confused.
Yes. So yes, he's part of the group now. He has a nickname. So back at the dig site, X-Ray pulls Zero to the back of the water line, showing that Caveman is higher up in the hierarchy of the group. Zero looks hurt, and Stanley looks a little sad about it too and confused, but he doesn't say anything. And I want to know who died and made X-Ray king.
He's running that place.
Yeah, I just don't get it. So it's nighttime at the camp and the doctor is having a group session with the D-Tent boys. We learn that Magnet stole a $1,000 puppy and that's why he's there. And the doc says, like, you all only get one life to live and y'all are doing bad. Y'all screwing it up already. So Stanley now has some clout in the group and is showing out a little bit, being a little bit of a class clown. And then Doc picks on Zero again, and I'm like, what does he have against this kid? But we also see that Zero only really responds to Caveman. He's really the only person who appears to show Zero any modicum of kindness. So let's move on. Stanley's mom sends him a letter detailing what's happening back at home. The landlord is threatening to evict them because of the smell, of course, from all of those stinky shoes. His mom makes a joke about the old woman in a shoe, and Stanley, who's reading the letter, laughs out loud. So Zero, who's nearby, asks about the joke, but he doesn't get it. Zero reveals that he can't read and asks Stanley to teach him. Stanley is like, I'm not really a good teacher, and I would rather spend my free time chilling than teaching you how to read. So it appears now that because Stanley is being accepted by the group, that his connection to Zero is less important. So y'all, illiteracy is like a big deal. Like there are tons of people who navigate this world and cannot read. It's actually like a problem, which again is another darker thing in this story. But Stanley leaves the tent and meets up with the rest of the crew who are all repelled by armpit stench when he raises his hands in the air. Zero is left in the tent feeling alone. Zero is also much smaller and presumably younger than the rest of the kids. He's maybe 11 or 12, or maybe he's just a smaller kid. I don't know. Well, back on the dig site, the kids admire a cloud that they wish would provide them some shade or some rain. Caveman finds something in his hole and Magnet sees, and so it kind of gets a lot of attention put onto Caveman. So Caveman calls over to X-Ray and they examine it. It looks a little bit like a bullet, but it's too skinny to be a shell. There's a heart engraved on it with the initials KB inside. X-Ray basically claims it, saying that he's going to show it to Mom and get the rest of the day off. Caveman protests because it was his hole that it came from. And also, X-Ray's hole was basically dug while Caveman's wasn't dug that much and that he could use a break. Now, Caveman is bucking the social order of the detent group by defying X-Ray's demands. So the crew kind of challenges him in a threatening way, but he backs down and suggests that X-Ray save the artifact for the next day so he can get a full day off as opposed to just the rest of this day when his hole is actually already dug. And there's another thing that happens is that the adults are not always monitoring the students. So different tent groups are located in different areas across the desert. So one of the adults will drive the water truck over to where the kids are periodically and to see who's finished with their holes. And then they'll drive to a different area. So the kids are not always supervised, which leaving kids alone in the desert with dangerous lizards and no way of communicating about it.
They don't care about these kids, not one bit.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. So because of this little showdown that happens between X-Ray and Caveman that Zero is watching, it's clear to both of them that while Caveman has a nickname, he is still an outsider and has no juice. He is at the bottom of the social order of the detent, basically with Zero. This hole that he finds the artifact in is marked with a large round stone. So we'll come back to that later. And then I noticed also that there's a weird song by Shaggy playing in the background. It's called Keeping It Real. And I'm like, what? It's so weird. This is strange. Well, the next day, X-Ray waits a little bit and he like digs a little bit of a hole. And then when someone comes around, I believe it's Doc, so the boys can fill up their canteens from like this large water tank on the back of the truck. He stages his deceptive move where he pretends to find the monogrammed artifact. The doc calls the warden to check it out, and the warden hops into their old school Chrysler to see what it is. Now, this is the first time we're actually meeting the warden, who's played by the iconic Sigourney Weaver. And she checks out the artifact and is so pleased that she orders Doc to take X-Ray back to the camp, give him double shower tokens and a snack, and to refill the water canteens of everyone in the group. Now, when Doc says that he already filled them, the warden checks him. And so the warden is really like, do as I say. Like, that's the way she operates. Mr. Sir is laughing at Doc getting checked, and she uses Stanley as an example to embarrass Doc. And so the warden still demands that X-Ray's hole gets dug even though he's not there, and she orders Zero and Caveman to work together to dig it. She even orders the other tents, like 2 other tents, to come to the same dig site to dig holes there. So it's obvious that they're not just doing character building. They are looking for something. Yeah. Right. A bunch of the boys have gathered at the dig site and they are like doubling their efforts in digging, but it's not near the place that the artifact was actually found. So because it's the next day, and because X-Ray kind of staged that like, hey, this is the hole where I was digging, they actually haven't found anything yet.
They dig like this massive, like elaborate tunnel system.
Yes. Like a tunnel system. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of crazy. Yeah. So back at the camp, Stanley asks how the warden knows everyone's name, or nickname rather, because when she came there, she was talking to them and using their nicknames as if she knew all of them. Right. When Stanley had never interacted with her. Zigzag, who is one of the tent mates, gives a paranoid answer about how she has the whole place wired with listening devices or cameras, right? And so in the shower, Caveman looks for listening devices. Well, he doesn't see anything, but in another flashback to that town where Sam and Catherine were, it's raining really hard and Catherine lets the kids out of school as Sam watches. Now he enters the class with some more onions, saying that he can fix the leaky roof in the classroom since he built his own boat so that he could transport himself to his onion fields. He offers to fix the roof in exchange for 3 jars of spiced peaches. They obviously have a crush on each other, right? Mm-hmm. The next day he fixes the roof, or whenever the weather gets better, he fixes the roof, and then she's like, oh, here are the peaches, but the windows also need a fixing. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I can fix that.
I can fix that.
Yes. And so they keep getting to enjoy each other, and he keeps fixing things right around the school, and they are getting like quite close. And so later, Catherine is actually holding night classes for some of the adult men who are learning to read as well, which I thought was really interesting. But the warden's grandfather, Mr. Walker with the gold tooth, disrupts the class, and Catherine is uncomfortable. And so she ends class, and Sam is there finishing up some repairs when Mr. Walker asks Catherine to take a ride with him on his new motorboat. And she's like, nah. And he's like, no one ever says no to Trout Walker. And she's like, I just did.
I just did. She's not feeling him at all.
She is not. And it's like, you don't know how to read. You're a big shot around town with a gold tooth and you think too highly of yourself. You're a class clown. It turns out that Trout's dad owns the lake, so it's not even like Trout owns the lake.
It's my daddy.
He's a Nepo baby?
Yeah.
Is that what they call him? Yeah. So she's like, no thanks. So back at the dig site, this movie goes back and forth between different storylines over and over again. So back at the dig site, the boys are digging the extravagant hole/tunnel system. And, you know, they're looking for whatever the warden is looking for. So back to the flashback, Sam and Catherine exchange eyes, and Sam has pretty much done all the repairs that need to be done to the school. And so we see him on his handmade boat called the Mary Lou. And later he sees Catherine crying at her desk at the school. And he says, I can fix that. They kiss each other, and Trout just so happens to be riding by on a horse outside the school and catches them kissing, which is dangerous, obviously. So Trout is not happy because Catherine was supposed to be his woman, right? And she rejected him, but she is kissing the Black Onion Man. So yeah, this is not good. At the dig site, we learned that it's been 4 days of them digging in this particular like large hole, and the warden is unhappy. Back in the flashback, Trout and his ignorant ass friends are torching the school. That man just did all those repairs.
I know. She was like, this is the best school in all of Texas. And then next scene, they're burning it to the ground because somebody's in their feelings.
Right.
Because they got rejected.
Right. Grow up. Men are very dangerous when they get rejected. Like,
yes.
Yeah.
And it hasn't changed no matter how much time has passed.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So when Catherine, who of course is crying and upset that the school, first off, I understand you being mad at Catherine for rejecting you, but this is going too far, obviously. But the school is an institution for the whole community. Like burning down the school because you are mad at the person that works at the school is crazy because this is something the whole community uses. Not only is she teaching the children, she's also teaching your grown illiterate behinds too. It just don't make no sense. Anyways, all hell is breaking loose. Catherine goes to the sheriff for help, but he's drunk. And he asks Catherine for a kiss, saying that she kissed the onion picker. When you kiss the onion picker, you can kiss me. And when she says... Right. When she says the sheriff is drunk, he says that he always gets drunk before a hanging. And my heart dropped. I did not remember that line. And I was like, look, Disney doesn't always go there, but they did with this film. Like, this is actually a mention of lynching 100 years ago. So it's like, they went there. And I was like, because the story takes place in Texas, it's like, this kind of sounds real.
Yes.
Yeah. So she runs off looking for Sam, who is rowing his boat on the lake. Catherine watches as Trout and his men take their motorboat on the water and kill Sam. They also killed Mary Lou, the 100-year-old mule. So it's pretty sad.
Yeah, it's messed up. All the men in the town, they suck. The sheriff, he sucks. What do you have that job for? And and she was like, if you're going to hang him, you better hang me too. And then he's like, well, it's illegal for him to kiss you, but not for you to kiss him. And I was like, oh God, this is BS. I hate it.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of another Disney movie where we actively see a character killed. It's far away enough that we don't see any blood or any gore or anything.
Yeah, they don't tend to show that stuff, especially in the kids ones. Like all the Marvel movies, all these people get like beat up and murdered and they don't see no blood, and that's why it looks funny. But not really. Yeah.
So I'm like, they made a special exception for Sam. I don't know.
Disney was like this time they had like more darker movies and stuff coming out before, like after maybe 2010, maybe they started not doing that, because like Hunchback of Notre Dame is a pretty dark movie, and that came out like not probably before this, but they had some movies that had like some darker stuff in it, and like Pocahontas, and like
they even lightened up Pocahontas from the real story, but Yeah. But yeah, back at the camp, the boys are tired and they are being directed to dig their own individual holes again since they aren't making progress on like this big dig that they're doing. So in another blast from the past, Catherine goes to the sheriff, who is hungover in the morning. It's possibly the next day. And she offers the sheriff a kiss before shooting him. She kisses his cheek and leaves like a little red lipstick print and rides away on a horse. So Kate done turned bad.
She a outlaw now.
Right. So on the dig site, Magnet, the resident thief, has stolen Mr. Sir's sunflower seeds as he drives away. When Mr. Sir doubles back, realizing the sunflower seeds are missing, the boys throw the bag of seeds around and it lands in Stanley's hole, and he has to scramble to cover them up. But he doesn't do a good job, and Mr. Sir actually kind of catches him red-handed and orders him to go see the warden. So the boys had been throwing around the sunflower seeds and grabbing a handful or whatever, and Stanley just kind of got caught in the crossfire. And so at the warden's cabin, which is air conditioned, which is hilarious, the warden is not happy with Mr. Sir for bothering her with this nonsense. But Mr. Sir is really happy with himself for catching a thief. Now, while Stanley is getting the warden's nail polish for her, he sees articles about Kissing Kate Barlow on the wall and recognizes her name as the figure that his family has a history with, right? Kissing Kate Barlow had stolen from his great-grandfather. So the warden actually makes her own nail polish with rattlesnake venom and says that it's harmless when it's dry. And she touches a scared Stanley's face with like a few wet fingernails. But when the warden gets fed up with Mr. Sir, she smacks the dog piss out of him. And he falls holding his face, and she had scratched him with her wet, rattlesnake venom fingernails. Stanley, of course, is freaked out and is asked to leave while the warden tells Mr. Sir that she liked him better when he smoked because, he's been using the sunflower seeds to curb his smoking. Arabi, what do you think of this scene?
This scene, I remember watching this scene when I was younger, and I know the part when she says she put rattlesnake venom. I was like, that's crazy, but kind of like really cool villain stuff. Like, I don't know, it's kind of crazy. And she touches Caveman's face, and I was like, ooh. But then when she turns around and smacks the crap out of Mr. Sir, I was like, oh snap. She's like, you bothered me with this crap. I'm sick of you. And he's like on the floor, hollering and kicking his legs and screaming. Oh gosh, it was a funny scene. I didn't expect her to like turn around and smack Mr. Sir, and Stanley's kind of like, I don't know what I just seen, but I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go get out of here. And he basically doesn't get in any trouble, and he just goes back to the dig site.
Yeah. I think this particular scene is supposed to show how the word's not coming to my mind, but like how mean the warden is and how she interacts with Doc and Mr. Sir, and how she can be really domineering and like has to have things done her way. And doesn't want to be bothered with small stuff. Like, she's looking for something in particular. And
you're going to say, oh, I found something. She got excited because she thought that they actually... And she was like, really? Okay.
So yeah, when Stanley returns to the dig site to show that he survived the warden, he finds that his hole has been completely dug by Zero. And when Stanley asks why, Zero says that he knows Stanley didn't steal those shoes in the same way he knows Stanley didn't steal the sunflower seeds. So Stanley, as a nice gesture, offers to teach Zero how to read. Now, back in the mess hall, one of the kids gets hemmed up for asking Mr. Sir what happened to his face. Mr. Sir has two very irritated cuts on his face from being smacked with that, rattlesnake venom polish. And he kind of goes off on all the kids. And he's like, ain't nothing wrong with my face. I'm kind of purty.
Yeah. He's embarrassed. He's embarrassed.
He is very embarrassed. Yes. So back at the dig site, Mr. Sir doesn't fill Stanley's canteen because of what happened to him. So Stanley is being punished with no water, which is so dangerous.
Yeah.
Because they're out there sweating. They obviously have to replenish their fluids. Like, they don't have no morals. Okay.
No.
So Stanley is kind of chilling at the dig site, and he remembers the artifact that he found and puts two and two together. He tells Zero that that tube that he found, he thinks is a tube of lipstick from Kissing Kate Barlow. Now, in a small montage, we see that Kissing Kate Barlow went on a crime spree, robbing people and trains and banks. And she went from being a school teacher to a bandit and an outlaw. And that is the history of this woman scorned.
Yeah.
So So at the camp, Stanley is trying to teach Zero to write his own name. Zero offers to help Stanley dig his hole so that they can be done at the same time, and Stanley won't be so tired and have enough energy to continue to teach him to read. It sounds like a fair trade to me personally. He also reveals that his name is Hector Zeroni. Oh my gosh, where have we heard the name Zeroni before?
It's like, oh, this story is coming together. We have a lot of connections.
Oh, Madam Zeroni for always and eternity. So back on the dig site, X-Ray is giving Stanley some heat for having Zero help him with his hole. So the other kids are like, we have to dig our own holes. Why is Stanley getting, special privileges of having someone assist him with his hole? We find out that Zero is pretty good at math. He just doesn't like answering stupid questions. So he doesn't really talk to any of the other guys, and they treat him like he is stupid. Yeah, so Zero, back at the tent, talks about his life with a struggling mom and how they were homeless and how one day she didn't come back to get him. He doesn't know where she is, and he wants to hire private investigators to find her. He also says that he used to wait at Laney Park, a place that Stanley knows. And when Stanley is like, oh yeah, I used to go there all the time, Zero's like, yeah, I used to sleep in the tunnel there. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Stanley's face drops. He's like, oh. And he was like, oh, it's no big deal. And I was like, dang, this poor kid used to sleep in the tunnel. That's so sad.
Yeah, and has to fend for himself. And it's like, a lot of times in Disney movies, there are tons of orphans, right? Or people whose parents have passed away. But we almost never talk about how the children literally became orphans or how they struggled and suffered. And it's like, I don't understand what's so special about this story that we get this extra darkness around it. Yes, but it's it's low key heartbreaking. And I'm like, I mean, unhoused children is a big problem as well, in the real world, particularly for queer children. Yeah, it's heartbreaking. Back in the dig site, the boys are getting lunch, and there is more flack because of the arrangement between Stanley and Zero. Zigzag decides to play a joke and offers Stanley a graham cracker to let him dig his hole. Stanley ignores him, but Zero is watching on with anger, right? Because Stanley's his boy. So when Zigzag smushes a cracker into Stanley's face, which I was like, excuse me?
Yeah. It's aggressive. What's your deal?
Right. They end up getting into a shoving match. And the weird doctor who is there refilling canteens, who's supposed to be helping these boys, decides to egg on the fight. And I'm like, I can't put my finger on the doctor. Is he there to help the boys or not? I really don't understand.
One of those characters that tries to be nice, but he's actually pretty seedy. And he was like, teach him a lesson. Hit him back. And I'm like, I didn't like that scene. Yeah.
being a freaking weirdo. I also want to point out that the doc appears to be the only one wearing sunscreen. These kids definitely need sunscreen.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. I couldn't.
So Zigzag and Stanley fight, and Zigzag gets the best of Stanley, and Zero, seeing this, jumps in to choke Zigzag from behind, and he almost chokes him out.
Yeah, and they gotta pull him off. Yeah. I'm like, Zero, let him go.
Right. And Zero is down for whatever, and I'm
he was a ride or die. The earlier scene with the cue ball, he was like, I'm about to, I'll knock it, and then now he's like, I'll choke this dude out for you, Stanley. I got your back.
Right. Read this. Yeah. So so now the dynamic of the tent is changing again, right? It's basically Stanley and Zero against the world. That's the social dynamics are changing within the group. So like you said, the boys have to actually pull Zero off of Zigzag, and the doc actually shoots a gun in the air to get everyone's attention. Y'all, do not shoot guns in the air. It happens on TV all the time, but what goes up must come down.
Must come down.
Bullets come back down. Don't shoot guns in the air. So the warden ends up getting called to the dig site to get the story on what happened between the boys. And the boys end up snitching about the digging arrangement between Stanley and Zero. So the warden orders Stanley to dig his own hole and to stop teaching Zero how to read. And Stanley's okay, I can dig my own hole, but why do I have to stop
teaching
Zero how to read? Yes. And the warden is like, because I said so. And it's like, what?
Does it make any sense?
It doesn't. They're not making any sense at all. The doc says some really mean things about how stupid Zero is and how, Zero can't read. And It was so bad.
It was terrible. He was like, there's nothing in his brain, and it's too much of a challenge for him to think that hard. So that's why he attacked Zigzag, because his brain was overfunctioning. I was like, what the heck? What is your deal?
So
Zero has done nothing. Like,
right. And he also is like, CAT, what does that spell? And Zero doesn't respond.
he doesn't know. And I was
He's
like,
learning how to
yeah,
read.
like, what? At least he's trying to better himself. Like, what the heck?
Right. And so Doc hands Zero a shovel and says basically like, you need to DIG. And Zero takes the shovel and smacks the doc in the face.
Oh my God. He whops him. That was like,
He did.
He might have had a concussion type of it.
Right. And he's also like, it spells dick.
Yeah. I know he wouldn't be like, bitch. Like, I knew that's what.
Yes. And so Zero takes that shovel and he runs away and he runs into the desert. So yeah, Mr. Sir pulls out his gun and the warden is like, what are you doing? He was like, I wasn't going to shoot him. Like, but anyway, the warden knows that he won't be able to get anywhere that fast. So she wants all of the water sources guarded because they know that he'll be looking for water. Mm-hmm. And she says that she still expects 7 holes from the detent group. So apparently Zero's hole still has to get dug and the group is suffering because of, what just happened. Back at the tent, the adults are nervous that Zero's disappearance might cause an investigation. They're reviewing his case to make sure he doesn't have any family that would come looking for him, which is crazy. They even plan to destroy his records from the system to make it seem like he was never there at all. Now, when Doc says no one cares about Hector Zeroni to reassure the warden that, like, this isn't going to cause a problem, Stanley enters the chat and says, I do. Yeah. So Mr. Sir claims that, well, Zero's blood will be on your hands, Stanley, which is like, wait, how?
Yeah.
Y'all are the adults that were in charge of him. Like, what?
This is your responsibility. What are you talking about? You're trying to erase him. Ugh.
Right. Yeah. But later that night, the boys are discussing Zero's survival and they are not hopeful. And Stanley is not engaging in the conversation. He is worried about his friend. So in another flashback, Stanley is learning more about his great-grandfather, who at this point is stranded in the desert with no food or water. This is the one that got robbed by Kate. Now, the legend says that he found refuge on God's thumb and was half crazy when he was found. Now, back at the dig site, Stanley calls out to Zero, who is like in a separate scene, kind of struggling in the desert somewhere else. We also see a bus bringing a new kid to replace Zero. This kid's name is Twitch, and he's a joyrider with a tick. He's a cute little kid. But at the dig site, Stanley is helping to orient the new kid when the older kids kind of break out into a fight behind the water truck. So Stanley uses this as a distraction to steal the truck. And he gets a few tips from Twitch, who, of course, steals cars. And Stanley's not old enough to know how to drive, so he's figuring it out as he goes. So when the car starts up, Mr. Sir realizes what's happening. He chases the truck, but he ends up falling into a hole. And Stanley is like being cheered on by his peers. And as an inexperienced driver, he ends up driving the truck into a hole because he's not looking where he's going. He's too busy looking back. And he runs away into the desert before the rest of the crew can catch up with him. So Mr. Sir is so pissed that he yells to Stanley that you better keep going or there ain't going to be no Yell Nats the Fifth. Which is funny. So the other boys are cheering him on as, he stuck it to the man and he's running off into the desert, right? And Stanley comes across a number of holes that have like a large number of lizards in them. It's not that important. So back at the dig site, the warden has a plan to deal with Stanley, who has a family that will actually care if he's missing. She says she's going to wait 2 weeks to report him as a runaway, call in a rescue party with the helicopters and everything, and then let them find his corpse. WTF.
That's crazy. She's like, yeah, they're going to be dead. I don't care about that. I just don't want the camp to be investigated because, we suck and they would shut us down. And I need to find whatever's out there in the desert. So I need them to keep digging.
Exactly. I was like, are they sure that Roald Dahl didn't write this story? Like, this has that same darkness as like Matilda.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yes, right? Mm-hmm. So we see Stanley and his empty canteen in the desert, as well as a vision of like Sam and Mary Lou. So there are, I guess these would be considered mirages. So Stanley comes across this upside down boat that has Zero under it. So this boat is actually Sam's boat, the Mary Lou that, you know, he was on when he was murdered. The two boys hug and Stanley tells him what happened. And Stanley is like, well, I basically came out here to like bring you back to camp. And this was basically Stanley's rescue mission to find Zero. And Stanley is like, if we tell her where we really found that, you know, artifact, that lipstick tube, like the Warden will be so pleased that we probably won't get into like too much trouble. But Zero is like,
I don't really want to go back
nothing
there.
interested in going back. Yeah. And then he asks a weird question. He's like, do you want some sploosh? And he's like, what? And so they go underneath the boat. And in this boat, there are mason jars of what Zero calls sploosh, but it tastes like peaches. And this is the last jar.
100
These peaches have been here for 100 years.
There's no way that kept in a mason jar. And they should have got like botulism or something. I don't know.
At least.
It's crazy.
At least.
It was like black, like dark purple or something when they were eating it.
Yes.
Oh, goodness.
Look, do what you got to do, I guess. But look, I don't know how science works. I feel like the sugars would have fermented and maybe would have even made the peaches alcoholic.
Maybe.
I don't know. Eating 100-year-old peaches in a boat is freaking crazy.
I don't know if I would have been like, I'm going to eat this because I don't have no idea what it is. What if it's not even something that's edible? Like, I wouldn't have done that.
Look, Zero was homeless. He is resourceful. He's got to do what he got to do to survive. And so those skills came in handy. So when Zero asks about the name of the boat, they are outside of the boat. Stanley ends up spotting a mountain in the distance that looks like a thumb. And they decide to head to the top of that because Stanley's ancestor claimed to have gotten refuge on God's thumb. So he's connecting back to his family history. And they start this dangerous climb to the top of this mountain. It's almost straight up, like they literally have to climb rocks in order to get there. And I'm like, what?
These regular boys have no, like, you know, people climb for like hobbies. They ain't got none of that history. And I was like, this is crazy.
Right. No history, no equipment, nothing. The climb looks impossible. It just does. So they get to one point where they are up super high and Stanley almost falls. Zero has to use the shovel for leverage to rescue Stanley, and his hands end up getting cut on the shovel, which looks awful. Oh, God. Stanley, you know, ties up the cuts. But back at the dig site, the other detent boys are wondering if they are okay out in the desert alone. They even miss Caveman, which is interesting. Now, as they keep climbing, Zero ends up getting sick and falls down a little bit of a slope. Stanley catches him and they rest for a little bit. And Zero is like, I need to tell you something, Stanley, but he passes out before he can. So Stanley puts Zero on his back and carries him up to the top of the mountain right as it's getting dark. And we hear the voice of Madame Zeroni saying that she must be carried up the mountain so she can get strong too. So this is a Yelnats carrying a Zeroni up a mountain, y'all. At the top of the thumb, there are bugs and we even hear frogs, which means that there is water. And Stanley is so happy to see water and splashes Hector with it because he's just passed out, and he comes back to life and they play in the mud and Stanley finds sweet onions growing in the ground. So now they have water and food. It's funny because Stanley takes a bite of the onion, hands it to Zero, and Zero's like, what is this? And Stanley's like, it's a hot fudge sundae. Just eat it.
Yeah. You'll eat the sploosh, but you're like, I don't know what that is coming out of the ground.
Right. You eat 100-year-old peaches. Just eat it. It's a vegetable, okay? And Zero is like, well, it's the sweetest onion I've ever tasted. So apparently these are magical sweet onions. I think I read that these were actually apples that they were eating that were, you know, made to look like onions. Because who's trying to bite into an onion? Oh,
yeah.
Gross. So the kids have water and food, y'all. Stanley lays down in the water and sings if only, the woodpecker sigh song, completing the task that his no good pig stealing great-great-grandfather forgot to do. Y'all, Stanley's out here breaking generational curses, and we love to see it. We love to see it. So back home, Stanley's dad is cooking up another foot smell cure and accidentally drops something into the pot. He asks his wife to smell the shoe that he was cooking, and she's like, I'm eating. Like,
Will you stop?
and he's like, no, like, smell it this time. And she's like, I don't smell nothing. And the shoe is odorless. And they discover the cure is a mixture of peaches and onions.
What is the coincidence?
Right. Yeah. So they all rejoice, including the grandpa, that their luck has finally turned around.
That curse is broken.
Right. So back on God's thumb, the kids are full of onions. They ate so many onions. Their canteen is full of water. And now Zero reveals to Stanley that he is the one who stole the shoes that Stanley was accused of taking. He was a kid at the orphanage and took the shoes not knowing they were famous. Again, he can't read, so there's no real context for what the shoes were or how important they were. When he realized what was happening, he took the shoes off and threw them over a bridge where they fell on Stanley's head. And Stanley recognizes this as fate and wasn't even mad about it. Would you be mad about it?
No, I wouldn't have been mad. I'd have been like, ah, dang, but you know, it was good I met you. I guess.
Yeah, I think Stanley was very mature about that because Camp Green Lake is awful.
Yes.
So apparently also Zero got busted the next day stealing shoes from Payless, which doesn't exist anymore. I kind of miss Payless. Back at the dig site, the boys notice a fancy car, a Jaguar, heading to the camp. It's Stanley's attorney. Oh, now they get an attorney demanding to see him. The warden demands that the lawyer come back with a court order. And so the adults talk as the lawyer leaves. And we find out that the lawyer came to give notice that Stanley was being released from the camp. The adults are scrambling because the story about him running away 2 weeks later isn't going to work anymore, especially now that the news is there that he is supposed to be released soon. By now, the boys have been gone in the desert for 3 days. And back on God's thumb, Stanley says that he's happy about the shoe thing and that he thought that he came to Camp Green Lake because he was cursed. But I guess it's fate instead. Stanley has a feeling that everything is cool and Zero agrees. And so they lay back and admire the stars. And Stanley is like, I feel so lucky. I just want to dig one more hole. So they head to the hole that was marked with the stone. We have no idea how they got down off of God's thumb, which sounds so much scarier than climbing up it. But we'll just skip over that. Okay. So they head back to the hole that was marked with that like round stone where he found the Kissing Kate Barlow lipstick tube. And we see a flashback to Kate sitting by Mary Lou in like the dried out lake. Mary Lou again is Sam's boat. She has a vision of him coming to her and she appears to be like dying and injured because she tells Sam that like, I feel cold. And Sam is like, I can fix that. So Kate has lived a life of stealing and robbing and appears to be towards the end of her life. So suddenly she is forced to come out of this, fantasy because a man and a woman have her at gunpoint demanding to know where Kate buried her loot. It turns out that this man is Trout Walker.
He looks rough, y'all. He looks like
he does.
A whole different person.
He does. Because I didn't recognize him. The only way I knew was the tooth.
Yeah.
And because she called him Trout. But yeah, I don't think I would even picked up on the tooth. But the woman who was a student of Kate's at one point is now Trout's wife and has been for like 13 years at this point. So it's been a long time. And we learned from Trout's wife that Trout's family lost their money when the lake dried up and the town disappeared, and it hasn't rained there since they killed Sam. So
justice.
They deserve it. Yes, They absolutely deserve that and more. Kate is basically ready to die. And she's like, if you're going to shoot me, just shoot me. I'm never going to tell you where I buried it. So Kate curses another curse. Kate curses Trout's family, saying that they will dig for 100 years and will never find the treasure. And right then, a cartoon lizard comes out of nowhere, and Kate uses it to unalive herself. But she tells Trout, start digging.
Start digging, Trout. And you'll never find it. I like her voice. It was like something.
Yeah, she's like a good actress. Did you watch Severance?
Mm-mm.
It's a good show. She's in it. She's been in a lot of stuff. She's like, people love using her in stories. Apparently her first film appearance was in like the third Nightmare on Elm Street, but she's been in a lot of stuff since then. She also has a famous brother, David Arquette.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's a good actress. But anyways, the boys, Stanley and Zero, make it back to the dig site and find the particular hole they're looking for with the round stone. Zero finds another shovel by sneaking back to the camp while, Stanley continues to dig. There's a funny scene. When Zero was heading back to the camp to grab another shovel, Doc and Mr. Sir are arguing. And Mr. Sir ends up throwing like a tire wrench or a crowbar at Doc. And I just thought that was so funny.
Yeah, he's like, don't throw stuff at me. Because he's like, you're an idiot. You left the key on the truck with a bunch of delinquents around. And then you got it stolen. I want to know how they got that truck out that hole, because I don't know how they could have managed to do that. I don't think they had the right stuff to get that truck out of that hole.
Well, they have the free labor of a bunch of children. So maybe that.
Oh, goodness. You think they lifted that truck out of there? Oh, gosh.
I don't know. They can figure it out. But yes, let's see. Okay, so back at the hole, Zero returns with a shovel, saying that they should probably go wider and not deeper. And so as Stanley is hitting one of the walls of the hole, he hears a thud, and it's some kind of chest that they pull out of the wall. And they are so excited. They found some stuff. And so Stanley was right about having like a good feeling. And right then, the warden and Mr. Sir thank the boys for helping to find this treasure. And right then, a bunch of lizards climb all over the boys and the chest. The adults basically say that they'll wait for the lizards to kill the boys before they go in and get the chest. And it's like, what the heck?
They have no qualms about killing these boys. They do not care.
They don't.
It's crazy.
They don't. Doc shows up and taunts Stanley, saying that his lawyer cleared his name and he's innocent, but he wasn't there to be released. The warden has a flashback about how her grandfather used to make her dig holes on the lake, even on Christmas. In a flashback, the young warden says, "I'm tired of this, Grandpa." And he responds, "Well, that's too damn bad."
That's an iconic moment. It's funny that he's in these now.
Yes, it is hilarious. And her grandfather actually was Trout, and you can tell by his tooth. He still had his gold tooth. And y'all, that scene is so funny, and it's a meme that comes up every so often. And one of my favorite versions of the meme is like Black people asking BET to stop always playing Baby Boy. and BET being like, "Well, that's too damn bad."
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, Jesus. The actor who plays Trout Walker actually passed away before the movie came out. And so I believe the film is dedicated to him, which of course is sad. But it's the next day and the sun is up and the boys are actually still covered in lizards, but have not received any fatal bites. The lizards are literally there just kind of chilling.
And it's because of the onions. Because they don't like the onions.
Right. Yeah. If you recall, onions are a natural lizard repellent, according to Sam. I don't know why. When Sam mentioned my onion juice, I was like, ew. You can call it anything else.
I mean, it is
the lizards don't like my onion juice. Ew. I just hate the way he said that. And if you recall, they ate so many onions, I'm sure they still smell like onions. So the lizards are still around them, but are not biting them, which I guess is not a repellent then, because
they're not going to bite it. They're like, I don't want to taste onion blood. I don't know.
I guess. Who knows? Anyway, Stanley's lawyer has returned to the camp with marshals or rangers. They might be Texas Rangers, and is ready to lay down the law and take Stanley home. The warden instructs Doc to keep the boys from talking to the authorities, and he heads back to the camp, but not before falling into a hole, which is pretty funny. Zero asks if Stanley's name is the same spelled backwards, and of course it is. Again, he's still learning how to read. The lawyer and her posse of lawmen are brought to the hole where the two boys are with the chest and the lizards. Now, the warden claims that the boys broke into her cabin and stole her trunk, and now they're there in the hole, which is obviously a lie. Mr. Sir starts slinking away from the area, presumably to avoid the lawmen. Now, when the warden calls Stanley a thief, he gets mad and hops out of the hole to confront her until the lizards kind of scatter a little bit. Zero also hops out of the hole with the chest, and once he's lizard free, the warden tries to wrestle away the chest from him. But Zero is like, no, the chest is Stanley's and has his name on it. And she's like, what? And indeed, it is Stanley's great grandfather's chest that has his name on it, Stanley Yelnats, which is crazy. So they go back to the camp and the warden is arguing with the lawyer about the chest, but it's already packed in the trunk and is ready to go home to its rightful owner. Stanley says, like, I'm not going anywhere without Zero. And when the lawyer asks for Zero's file, the adults start freaking out because there is no file. If you remember, they decided to delete it. And so the boys from the other tents and from D tent come out to say hi to the oniony boys, Stanley and Zero. And Doc reveals that there is no Hector Zeroni file. And so one of the lawmen is like, what kind of operation is this? And so he makes a phone call to start an investigation of the camp, while the other lawman peeps out Mr. Sir and ends up recognizing him as a man named Marion Sevillo. He's in violation of his parole. And we also learned that Pendanski isn't a doctor, which explains why he's so crazy and doesn't do doctorly things, even though he tries sometimes. The lawmen sit the adults down now that the place is under investigation and they are kind of under arrest, I guess. It's about time for them to leave, but then suddenly thunder rolls, and for the first time in 100 years, it starts to rain. The boys all rejoice, and they are outside playing in the rain, and the lawyer is like, we need to go. The boys play in the rain for a little bit, but she's like, y'all two, Stanley and Zero, get in the car.
Let's roll out.
Right. The boys say their goodbyes, and even X-Ray does like this weird lip biting goodbye, which I was like, what was that about?
I'ma see you again. I'ma see you again. Like, okay, relax.
The warden begs Stanley to open the chest, and he's like, excuse me? Which is her little catchphrase.
Yeah.
But yeah, Stanley and Zero head home, y'all. So back at the smelly apartment, Stanley's dad opens the chest, and it is full of treasures. There's gold and gems and stocks from the early 1900s. And Stanley says that they should split the monies with Zero in half. And the family is like, okay, cool. Arabia, is that fair? Do you feel like Zero is entitled to half of that monies?
Yeah, because I don't think he would have really gotten it without him. I think it was really nice of him to be like, yeah, this is half yours because I went up that mountain with you. I broke my curse. So I was managed to get back. So the curse broke and it allowed me to get out of this place, and I got to take you with me. So, yeah.
I can see that. I can also see them being like, here's a third. When the grandpa hears that Zero's last name is Zeroni, he kisses Zero knowing that like the curse is broken. Like, I think that was like a really good moment for the grandpa to be like, oh, that pig stealer, like, it's over. So next up, we see a bus come to a town at night, and it's Zero's mom, who was found by the private investigator he hired with his newfound wealth. It's a sweet moment to see them reunite. And so with their new money, the boys bought neighboring houses. So they live next door to each other. Now, as we mentioned earlier, Stanley Yelnats is the great-great-grandson of Elia Yelnats, and Zero is the great-great-great-grandson of Madame Zeroni. And because of what happened on God's thumb, that curse was broken. So the boys from D10 are actually at the Yelnats house. They have like a nice house with a big yard and a pool, and they're cooking out and swimming. And Stanley is doing a voiceover. We find out that Camp Green Lake closed. The boys who were still there were, granted time served and sent to real counselors. And the camp was going to become a girls' camp where they can avoid lizards as long as they eat enough onions. The group gathers around a TV as a commercial of Sweet Feet advertising Sploosh. It's the foot odor killer that Stanley's dad made and apparently was named based on what Zero called that 100-year-old peach mixture. So I hope Zero is getting some royalties for naming that product. And so now everything is looking up for these families, right? We got, Henry Winkler is a inventor and, makes a product that's so good it's being advertised by a famous athlete. Sweet Feet and his wife were actually at the house with them,
which I thought was kind of crazy, but yeah.
Right, that was a little crazy. It was, yes. But yeah, everything's looking up for them. And the movie ends with Stanley telling us to fill in the rest of the holes ourselves. So yeah, that's the end of the movie, y'all.
Mm-hmm. It was a nice little wrap up. I like that they had like a statue in their yard holding a a shovel.
Yeah, that was cute.
The connections are pretty cool. It's like Hector Zero's great-great-grandma being Madame Zeroni, and then Stanley's grandfather being the great-great stealing pig stealer who didn't, consider, and then the warden's great-great-grandfather being... It was like a whole bunch of being Trout and who basically getting his Stanley's grandfather to get his stuff stolen, and then the thing they're looking for to be belonged to Stanley. Like, it's a cool way that it webs together and how they're all the people in the story are connected.
Yeah, I enjoyed the way they wove those stories together. Well, at the end of every review, we ask the same two questions. Is it worth a rewatch, and does it hold up today? Arabia, what do you think?
It's worth the rewatch, especially if you've seen it before when you were younger, and like a nostalgia thing, and you can show it to like kids now, and I think they would enjoy it. The whole camp situation and how that worked, that was not right, but I think it like holds up for the most part. What do you think?
Yeah, I think yes to both questions. It was entertaining to rewatch, and I caught the significance of some stuff that was like a little deeper and darker than I remembered. There's like the mistreatment and abandonment of children, being unhoused, child delinquency, poverty, not being able to afford good legal representation, ladies on killing sprees, generational curses, forbidden interracial relationships, and even a mention of lynching. So if you like this movie as a kid, I suggest you watch it again and tell me if you picked up on how serious this stuff was, like, as a kid. So yeah, looking back on it, I think it would probably be a movie that's better for older children, maybe like 12, maybe not necessarily much younger than that. But when it comes to the story holding up, there are some egregious things that happen to the children, which the way that the camp was operated, like, that's piss poor. But I would imagine that there are similar places that don't have enough regulation, that like there may actually be places like it, not necessarily work camps, but places that don't have a lot of oversight or regulation. But besides the CGI lizards, I feel like the story pretty much holds up. The lizards, like, get them out of here. Yeah. Yeah. Even with the more mature themes, I feel like the movie is kind of realistic. It's enjoyable to watch, and it even highlights some issues with like the juvenile criminal justice system. The only thing that really left me wanting from this movie, because they really wrapped it up with a nice bow, right? But the only thing that I wish they would have done is make sure that X-Ray got his just desserts for being a butthole.
I don't think so. He was at that pool party.
Right. And I was like, not in my pool. No. But this movie is also chock full of stars, and there's a major theme of friendship and fate. And it's like just a cool story. It's still one of my childhood faves. So let's talk a little bit about the ratings. The critics over at Rotten Tomatoes gave Holes 78%, while the audience gave it 76%. What do you think of these ratings?
I would rate it a little higher, but I can see why they did that. It's like in the 80s for me, but I can agree with those.
Yeah, I think that these ratings are a little low as well. After watching it as an adult, I think the subject matter is a little heavy for younger kids and the CGI sucks, but overall it's a good story. So I think I'd give it like 85 or 87. That's kind of how I'm feeling about it.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for listening to our review of Holes from 2003 here at Sup Media Reviews. Listeners, what are your thoughts on this movie? Does it hold up for you? Did you rewatch it recently? Share your thoughts with us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. I want to say a special thanks to Arabia for joining me today. Say bye, Arabia.
Bye, guys. See you next time, because I will be back, of course.
Yes. Now join us next time when the Cage Queens, Aaron and Jesse, return to help me review Shrek 2 for its 20th anniversary. You don't want to miss it. Peace out. Thanks for listening to Sup Media Reviews. I hope you enjoyed our trip down memory lane just as much as I did. If you have any suggestions for movies or TV shows you'd like me to review next, or if you just want to share your thoughts on today's episode, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Pinterest at Sup Media Reviews, and on supmediareviews.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you have a moment, please leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps me improve the show and spread the word to new listeners. So until next time, peace out, home slices.